Hello, I'm Otto, and welcome back to Dyson Sphere program. So in the last episode, we started setting up our mall, and we are going to be attacked by the dark fog soon. So in this episode, we're going to get attacked by the dark fog. We're going to go attack the dark fog and take care of the base that is on our planet. We are also going to continue working on the mall, and then we're also going to be filling out the rest of the smelting area and the components section. So for that, we're going to need some extra machines. So I like to just go through and start collecting some of the stuff that we have. We don't have a lot because we do not have a lot of this area set up over here, but we can definitely start collecting some of this. Whoops. Let's see, we need some belts. That's enough to keep us going. Definitely going to need some of the turrets and the ammo. So let's get the dark fog. That takes care of that wave, and the other wave looks like it is coming. That doesn't really matter. So let's fly over here and start setting up the smelting area. You might have some situations where the power is kind of teetering back and forth. You can always add in an extra row over this way if you want. Let's start from the bottom because these are kind of the most important. The copper is pretty important. The stone, brick, and iron down here are definitely important. You can see I did set up a couple of extras just because I was starting to run out of stuff. I can hear them attacking. On a lot of the other planets, we'll probably set up more defensive structures just to make sure that if and when we get attacked, it won't be something that kind of catches us too off guard. Okay, so that is going to be it for the smelting area. For the components area, we're going to do... let's get one of these over here just to kind of help us out. Steel and the iron to go with it. Most of this we had fully fleshed out, but yeah, there you can see the this thing is actually taking quite a lot of power from us, so that is why you're going to see some power drainage if you're using those. And now it's basically back to normal. Like I said, you can always add a little bit of extra power. If you were like doing a little bit more than what I'm doing, you could also always tap this coal up here and use that for thermal power. I'm not too concerned with it at the moment. I know that this is going to settle down after a while. What we're doing up here is going to be plenty enough. And you'll also find that as we are kind of expanding our base, the wind turbines that we are placing will largely keep up with the demand. Yeah, so that covers most of that. We are definitely going to need some more of the turrets and ammo, so I'm going to spend a little bit of extra time. Actually, you know what? While we're waiting for some of these to collect, let's upgrade some of our items. So we did grab a stack of the Mark II inserters, or sorters. And there's a couple of ways that you could go about upgrading these. A lot of these don't need to be upgraded, but I tend to prefer to use whatever is the best available to me at the time. I don't like to carry old stuff with me, so I like to upgrade what I can when I can. Some of the belts and stuff, you'll see that I won't necessarily upgrade all of them. There will be some that I upgrade, but once it gets to the point where I start using the new one, then I completely disregard the old ones. The only time that this might become a problem is if you were mega basing. Generally, you maybe don't want to use the best sorters. It's almost too much computation for the value that you get out of it. So in some cases, you would use, for instance, the Mark II or the Mark II sorters when possible, rather than just whatever's best. But for the most part, we will largely be using what's best. There will be some situations where we use, for instance, the Mark III sorters and some of the pile sorters. So we might use both in a build instead of using just the pile sorters or whatever. Okay, so let's upgrade. So the way that you would typically upgrade is you would just select whatever building that you want and just upgrade it like that. And that completely replaces whatever is there with whatever you're upgrading to. You can also use this to skip ranks. So we could upgrade straight from these to the pile sorters if we wanted. And you can also downgrade. So we could, for instance, downgrade these if we wanted. But in this case, we are going to be upgrading them one rank. And then we're going to use this blanket. So this just gives us an area where it'll, and I'm going to use the plus sign to increase the area. So this will just take everything that is able to be upgraded and just upgrade it. Now, a lot of that, the negative sounding is because some of the items it's attempting to upgrade, like the belts and the smelters and the assembling machines, but we don't have them. So you could also say, you know what, just do the sorters. So undo the belts and the facilities, and then that way you won't get that kind of racket. So we're just going to go over all of this. And in that particular case, the stuff you were hearing there was, I did have a couple of the Mark II sorters down. So at this point, we don't need the Mark I sorters anymore. So I'm going to refilter these and put these back into the container. That's one nice thing is even though this is red, even though we have this blocked off for just one stack, we can still shift click into this, whereas in a game like Factorio, it does not allow you to do that. You'd have to manually move them. Thankfully, this game allows us to do that, so yeah, that is one advantage. We're also going to need a little bit of... I have enough foundation. Like, this is plenty enough foundations to get rid of the machine that we're going to be... the dark fog machine that we're going to be getting rid of. You might want a little extra. I think you need like it's around like 250 to remove it, but we'll get into that shortly. So I'm going to skip a little bit and wait for some of the ammo to build up. We will need some more turrets as well. I'm going to bring... how many do I have? I have 5. So I'm going to set up a little bit of a blueprint that will take 5 of these machines. So we'll probably want at least 15 to 20. It's definitely not necessary. Like, you can kind of creep your way into attacking the dark fog with maybe like 10. It's definitely a good idea to have some extra defenses though, just in case. Okay, so I've got 20 of the turrets. We've got some ammo. We are going to take a look at the map real quick because we want to see which direction we want to come in from. So I'm going to come in from this direction. So we're going to go towards the west. Sorry, we are facing the south, so I'm going to go towards the east. I've been oriented towards the south just because I prefer to work from left to right, and the way this was just kind of set up, it was better when facing the south. So we're going to head towards the east, and we're going to go over to this section. Thankfully, we have unlocked flight, so we can get there a little bit faster. Oh, energy. We need some fuel. Where did I have that? Over here. Yes, we will need to do something about that soon too. So I guess since this happened, we can also talk about the wireless power towers. So you can place wireless power towers to help charge your mech off of the grid. So you can see that the grid is now being very much taxed, and that's largely to help us fill up. On a lot of the planets, I like to actually have a section like this, a little bit bigger, set up so that we can just land and get our energy back. But for now, we're going to remove that, and there are a little bit better designs, which I will get into later. But anyways, So one of the things that I wanted to talk about with specifically the dark fog and not necessarily dark fog, but blueprints, which is potentially going to be something not necessarily in this save, but if you were playing on a separate save, this is definitely something to be aware of. So now that we have landed, I'm going to set up some power. This is definitely overkill. We do not need this much, but I always like to be a little bit more prepared. So if I go into blueprint mode, you can kind of see that this is pretty close to the middle of the map. This is the equator here, or somewhere in here. But you can see these tropic lines, and you can see how there's a difference between this section and this section. So one thing to be aware of is if you are building blueprints in a way, so we're going to be building a blueprint this way that faces in this direction. If you're building a blueprint that goes over the tropic line, you should know that you can pretty much only place it on that tropic line. So we would be able to place it here, and we'd be able to place it here. But that's something to be aware of. I think that YouthCat Studios is trying to, I think they're coming up with a way, or maybe they already have come up with a way, I don't know if it's implemented yet or not, to be able to place buildings that have had a blueprint made on the tropic lines outside of the tropic lines. But either way, that is just something to be aware of. And then we're going to get out of this. So we're just going to make a little bit of a blueprint real quick. So one thing to note is you can kind of see that the turrets are facing a specific direction, and we want to make sure that they are lined up like this so that they are facing the direction that we want to make the blueprint. And the reason why is because you can place belts to feed them ammo, and the belts would go right through the middle. But the problem is that they only go in one direction. So they do not go in this direction. They will go in this direction. So we are also going to place a splitter on the end over here with a chest. And make sure to connect that. And then it needs power. So we're going to squeeze in some power towers. And then we would give this some ammo, and that allows this to get some ammo. So something else that you will see me do is I like to grab a stack and click, control click shift. Grab a stack and control click into the machines. That will kind of speed up the process. That is initially how I will start attacking, but you will also see me place the ammo into the box. That will allow us to continue to feed it. So I'm going to take a little bit of a blueprint of this. We're just going to copy this, and I'm going to use it now. We'll save it to a blueprint later, but that allows us to place it, and then you can just Control V to place it again. For now, we are going to not place it like that. And we're going to move up just a touch. Yeah, maybe here's fine. We can start here. So now I can start to place this. And it might be a good idea to have a couple of these nearby, just to kind of help get this stuff down. And you don't want to progress too fast. So at this point, we're pretty close. I'm surprised that they haven't started attacking. There we go. We've started attacking. So once you kind of get through the initial round, then I start to creep forward. So we're going to get a little bit closer now. You don't want to get too close. At this point, we can probably get closer and it's fine. But if you get too close, then some of their buildings will start destroying your stuff before you actually have the ability to fire back. And your buildings do have slightly more range than theirs. So if you are being attacked, you could just step back a little bit. And like I said, I just kind of creep forward. That might be too... No, that's fine. And then once you get a defensive line up at the front, you can start to remove the stuff in the back to kind of conserve ammo and bring a lot of this forward. Let them get through some of those buildings, and then we can get a little closer. Yeah, so they're already starting to attack. You can also use this supernova ability, which will kind of like have this like little bit of a burst. You can set these to different control groups. So if we had done that ahead of time, they would have all kind of had this supernova attack all at the same time. It just uses a lot of power and then has this like burst. So let's just do this one by itself. So it'll stop attacking, it'll charge up the supernova, and then it will launch an assault. It's pretty awesome. That is something else to be aware of. I might add, whenever I create this blueprint, I might just add in these two control groups so that you can, maybe separate control groups so that you can maybe fiddle with that. Okay, so at this point, everything has been cleared. You have to clear every dark fog enemy that this base has to be able to fill this in. And there's a couple of different options that you have here. You can either fill this in, which requires basically 100,000 soil piles. And later on in the game, that is not a big deal, but early in the game it is. So right now we only have 175k soil piles. So this is taking more than half of what we have. And we have a lot of water on this planet. There's going to be a lot to fill in. So either you're going to be filling this in and using a bunch of soil piles and probably farming soil later, or you can leave it and set up defensive turrets around it. But the thing is you're going to be hearing the dark fog base has been destroyed very often. One thing that you definitely don't want to do this early in the game is attack the relay station. You can actually just destroy it, and then this will stay, and it'll be much longer period of time before the dark fog comes back to this planet. But what that will do is it will increase the threat that we get from the dark fog that is out in space with their own little Dyson sphere being built. They didn't take long for this thing to respawn.
Dark fog base core destroyed.
So if you don't want to hear that a lot, then you definitely want to fill this in. Yeah, so I'm just going to fill this in. So the relay station is going to leave, and it is going to head back to the hive, wherever that was just now. So it is going to go back to the hive, and it will eventually try to come back, but for now it is there. You can also see that it left this concrete patch where we filled in the hole. These holes, like, the advantage of leaving this is you can eventually get this guy here. So this is a geothermal power station. Normally we have these for lava planets, for decent early game power on a lava planet. These can be placed inside that hole, and they generate a ton of power. Like basically all the power that we have in our base, this would generate more. So that is something to be aware of. For now, I'm just going to remove all of this. I'm going to leave the wind turbines, just in case they decide to come back. They might be like over here, or they might be further back here. They will try to come back before we're done with this planet, but once you get to a certain point, once you have populated a planet to a certain point, they will stop trying to go to a planet. I'm not sure what the distance is between where they can land, or like how populated it actually has to be. It kind of seems more, again, I don't know this for sure, but it kind of feels more like a heat map type of thing, where if you had some more buildings like scattered in the area, it just kind of creates a bubble. But that doesn't necessarily mean that if you place one thing that they can't just build near it. Anyways, that's not really a concern of mine, because the dark fog on the base settings is pretty easy to deal with, even if they really catch you off guard. So anyways, moving along from here, I have recently unlocked the, where is it? The chemical plant up here. So we can add this to our line. We also need to add in the oil products. We have a couple more things. We need to add these in as well. So let's get, I'm going to place a couple more of these down. And then using our blueprint, I'm going to extend this. Go gadget bots. Oh, these get placed in that center section. All right.
Insufficient materials.
Yeah, we'll get rid of this one later, but for now, it'll be nice to have the extra bots going. Okay, so what else do we want? You can kind of see that the order that we have going here is not necessarily. Let's upgrade these sorters. It's not necessarily in any particular order. I just kind of picked some of the stuff that we kind of need now and went with it. Why are you blinking? What is going on over here? Oh, it just doesn't have the chest. Okay, not a big deal. Actually, now we should be able to make... Oh, it's the iron. Okay, so that'll take care of that. Alright, like I said, or like I was saying, I kind of just add in whatever I want. Like, you don't necessarily have to have it in any particular order. Just because whatever you have is always available. So, as an example, we're going to go with the oil extractor and then the oil refinery. We are also going to need some fluid storage, so let's get that going. And the chemical plants are generally pretty close to being tied with these, so we're going to add that in too. Now, if you wanted to add in the water pump, that is perfectly fine. I am indifferent to the idea of adding a water pump to an early game mall like this. I'm going to have a mall later in the game that we will convert to in the mid game, and I'm literally going to have everything that we can make in this mall, so it's going to literally contain everything. But for the most part, these water pumps, we only really need them for a little bit of water on this planet and using them for sulfur later, for sulfur oceans. It is not necessarily something that you have to make a mall for, and there's a bunch of items that are like that. This just happens to be one of them. Oil extractors are another one. These two, you just generally don't make that many of them, so having them on a mall is kind of like almost pointless. But you know what? I'm gonna do it anyways. Not in this mall. I'm gonna actually choose to handcraft these. The reason why I'm going to choose to handcraft these is because of the electric motors. If you did want to have these on this mall, you would just need to have the electric motors next to it. You would probably get rid of this, and it would look something like this. And then you would bring in the other three materials. So I am not going to do that. I am instead... we're going to go with something else. So... obviously, I need some storage. We did fluid storage. Okay, so I'm going to do the storage here. I'm going to leave this one for the other storage, the bigger depot up here, which we will unlock once we get to red science. So I'm going to leave that section there for this. And is there anything else? I don't think I have any miners yet. So let's get some miners. And do we do chemical plants? Chemical plants are there. Matrix labs. I'm also not worried about the battlefield analysis because it uses the semiconductors and engines, both of which we do not have available on the bus. So if we need more, I'll probably just handcraft them. I have 6 of them. That's generally fine. The most value that we get out of them this early in the game is for the extra bots. So yes, later on they will be automated and they will have their own section in a mall, but for now we are definitely not going to have them on here. But the matrix slabs we could definitely use some more of. We will be extending this later because there are some other things that we will be unlocking that they need things that aren't necessarily on the bus. So as an example, the turrets here, you can kind of see that they need both engines and motors. So when we have to make these and make the engines for them, the motors and the engines are not available on our bus, but the steel and the circuit boards are. So when we decide to make these and maybe even the ammo for them, we're going to have to kind of like work around not having these on our bus, and that's perfectly fine. We will have a section that will be kind of dedicated to early game engines and maybe even the combustible units too. We'll see. Our goal at this point is 2 parts. 1, we need to get to red science, and 2, we are aiming to get to the bots. Once we get to the bots, that kind of like frees up a lot of this like bus nature that we have going on with this mall, and things become, let's say, a little bit easier. And we did already kind of start to set that up with this section over here, because the final stage of the blue belts over here will need to use the bots. We are not going to have any kind of bus items coming in for this. Yeah, so I think that covered everything that I wanted to talk about in this episode. Can get rid of these. So I'm going to take some time after and set up all of the belts here. Maybe if I could, I'll just go over this just a little bit. So I did add in all the belts, obviously, and there were a couple of sections that I needed to add in power poles. So I added power poles over here. I believe I will probably end up having to add some over here as well. There's a few things that need the stone bricks, and I typically like to have the longer belted item first next to the wind turbines. I feel it just looks better, but that's not always the case. And to be honest, we're going to be looking at this so infrequently that it won't matter anyways. We just come over here to collect some of the items. So literally however you can squeeze these in, that's just, whatever you got to do to get it going. We're only going to be paying attention to the stuff on the bottom here for the most part. So that is going to be it for me for this episode. In the next episode, we definitely need to start working towards red science. So we will probably cover a lot of the oil, producing some of the oil in the next episode. That will take a bit of time to discuss. I'm going to have all of this hooked up by then, so expect to see this all connected. I don't think that I will have any problems with anything here. So it's just a little bit of tasking. There will be some sections where, okay, so this is not a big deal. Okay, we should be fine. All right, so that is going to be it for me for this episode. I will see you in the next one, and thanks for watching.